Outlaws target a single mother's farm, not knowing she's a former Green Beret sniper. The midday sun beat down on the crops surrounding Martha's farmhouse. The wind rustled through the leaves of the tall trees at the edge of her property, creating a peaceful atmosphere. However, inside the house, Martha was far from relaxed. She was crouched behind her kitchen counter, rifle in hand, staring intently at the window. Her gaze was fixed on a group of men who had just driven up to her neighbor's vacant farmhouse and were now approaching it. These men reeked of trouble, and Martha knew she had to act fast. Martha wasn't your typical farmhouse owner. Then she was a former Green Beret sniper with a sharp eye and nerves of steel. Years ago, she had left the battlefield behind to start a new mission, raising her 2 kids alone after her husband's death. But when danger came knocking on her door, she was ready. The men rummaging through her neighbor's house were led by Butch Cavendish, a notorious criminal with a reputation for violence and a long list of victims. He was a dangerous man, and Martha knew that if he found out she was there, she might not survive. With a heavy heart, she knew she couldn't just hide. She had to do something. As the sound of shattering glass reached her ears, Martha's heart skipped a beat. Cavendish and his gang were moving fast, and it was only a matter of time before they discovered her. As she held her breath, listening intently, the sound of footsteps drew closer, each step echoing the impending doom. Suddenly, the screen door burst open, and one of the outlaws stepped in. "Hello," he called out, his voice echoing through the empty house. "Anyone home?" Seizing the moment, Martha sprang into action. She swiftly moved to the back of the house, disappearing out of sight. But as she made her way through the tall grass, she knew she was being watched. The danger was palpable, and she could feel the eyes of her pursuers on her back. Meanwhile, back at the house, the outlaws were growing impatient. They had come for the valuables rumored to be hidden in the old farmhouse, and they weren't willing to wait forever. "I don't have time for games," Butch Cavendish growled, his voice laced with menace. "Let's get this place turned over and find what we're after." As the outlaws continued their search, Martha made her way to the woods at the edge of her property. The dense canopy of trees provided some cover, but she knew she couldn't stay there forever. She needed a plan, and she needed it fast. Martha had lived on this farm for many years since her husband, a retired Green Beret himself, had passed away. She had transformed it into a sanctuary, a place where she could raise her 2 kids in peace. But now that peace had been shattered, and she knew she had to fight back. As she looked out from her hiding spot, she saw her chance. One of the outlaws had climbed onto the roof to get a better view of the surroundings. It was a risky move, and Martha knew she could take him out with a well-placed shot. But she hesitated. Killing was never an easy decision, and she didn't want to take a life unnecessarily. However, as she watched, another outlaw joined the man on the roof, and then another until all 5 of them were exposed and vulnerable. In that moment, Martha knew she had to act. If these men found her, she wouldn't hesitate to defend herself. With a deep breath, she took aim. Her finger tightened on the trigger, and she fired. One of the outlaws cried out and collapsed, clutching his chest. The others scattered, diving for cover.
"Oh, Butch Cavendish."
Realizing the danger, yelled for everyone to halt. As the adrenaline surged through her veins, Martha prepared for the next move. She knew that whatever happened, she couldn't stay put. She had to keep moving. Taking advantage of the chaos, she slipped away from her hiding spot and disappeared into the woods. Butch Cavendish, enraged by the sniper fire, ordered his men to split up and search the area. They had to find the woman responsible, and he would personally make sure she paid for what she had done. The woods echoed with their shouts as they combed through the trees, but Martha was nowhere to be seen. She had anticipated their actions and had already moved to a safer location, a cabin deep in the woods that she used for hunting. There she stashed her rifle and made a plan. She would use her knowledge of the woods to her advantage, turning the very nature that surrounded her home into a deadly trap for the outlaws. Cavendish and his men finally regrouped at the main house, frustrated and empty-handed. They had found no trace of Martha, but they weren't about to give up. Butch Cavendish, determined to succeed, devised a new strategy. He would lay a siege to the farmhouse, cutting off all escape routes and waiting for Martha to make a move. His men spread out, forming a tight perimeter around the house. But little did they know, Martha was already several miles away, deep in the woods. She had anticipated their every move and had used the time they spent searching to escape to her secret cabin. From there, She watched and waited, knowing that the outlaws would eventually return to their base. And when they did, she would be ready. Days turned into nights, and the outlaws grew restless. They were tough, but the relentless pressure of the siege was starting to wear on them. Just as Butch Cavendish began to lose hope, Martha made her move. She had spent the last few days preparing, gathering supplies and making sure her kids were safe. It was time to end this ordeal once and for all. She moved through the trees like a shadow, her presence undetected. The outlaws, exhausted and on edge, didn't notice her until it was too late. One by one, they fell victim to her skills, collapsing to the ground without even realizing what had hit them. Butch Cavendish, realizing the danger, tried to flee, but he was too late. Martha was faster, more agile, and she had the element of surprise on her side. As she approached, he could see the determination in her eyes, the same look he had seen on the faces of countless enemies on the battlefield. He knew in that moment that he was facing a true warrior, and there was nothing he could do to stop her. With the outlaws neutralized, Martha returned to her farmhouse, her mission accomplished. The siege was over, and her family was safe. But as she surveyed the scene, she knew that this was just the beginning. The authorities would want answers, and she would have to explain how she had managed to take on and defeat an entire gang of outlaws. But for now, she allowed herself a small victory, savoring the feeling of justice served. The ordeal had been terrifying, but she had faced her fears head-on and emerged victorious. As the sun set over the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, Martha stood on the porch of her farmhouse, her children by her side. The events of the past few days had been traumatic, but they had also been a testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit. In the face of overwhelming odds, Martha had defended her home, her family, and her independence. She had shown that it didn't matter if you were a former Green Beret sniper or just a regular person trying to live their life. What mattered was that you were willing to stand up for what you believed in and protect those you loved. As the stars twinkled above them, Martha knew that her life would never be the same. But she also knew that she was stronger because of what she had endured. And as she looked at her children, she knew that she had taught them the most important lesson of all, that no matter what challenges they faced in life, they could overcome them if they had the courage to try. And so, under the watchful gaze of the stars, Martha and her children stood on the porch of their farmhouse, ready to face whatever the future might bring. Thanks for watching.
Comment,
and subscribe for more updates.